shows. Shows up in a lot of different places, network, digital, and otherwise. How long the sound bite will be from you, well, that's yet to be determined based on the lengths of some of the other ones. We'll do some other creative content. So some custom content for clients that will shoot a presentation, add some other visuals in that. We've done short form, long form, that type of thing.
Okay.
So, give me a test 1, 2, 3.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Good. Name, title, organization.
Sanjeev Wadhwa. I'm President and CEO of Life Singularity.
Great. And Sanjeev, what or not is Life Singularity, and what are you guys doing here at Bio?
So we are an AI, VR, blockchain company. We have spent last 4 years developing our capability in AI and VR, and we have built a virtual assistant technology which is focused on prediction of health events, and then we use the VR capability to intervene in those health events ahead of time. So the last component, the blockchain, is to build those new relationships with patients or consumers, which has not been possible up until now. So the smart agreement part is through the blockchain. And we are at Bio because we bring innovation, which is at the bleeding edge, and Bio has welcomed that kind of thinking and ability to be a part of or sharing that with the attendees and audiences here, and that's why we are here.
Very good. Does that interrupt? No? Okay, good. Okay. Tell me about the panel that you were part of. What exactly did you share with attendees, and the type of topics you illuminated?
Yeah, so we did 2 panels. One was yesterday on what we call is brain health, but the actual panel was mind electric. And the reason we did that because up until now, brain has been thought to be this kind of independent mechanism and independent neural network, and your body has different collaborations. But now as we've understood how mind and body kind of come together, and there's these non-neural networks in addition to the neural network in your brain, and how all of these work in collaboration to either cause disease or prevent disease. And so we had a very eclectic group yesterday which brought together non-drug technologies, so drugless technologies, in a drug conference. And the thinking was that could we create a new modality of care, which is for opioid abuse, for depression, for pain, and these technologies are all immersive virtual reality models, and they tend to take your mind sort of away from pain, and these are actual interventions. They're being put through clinical trials. So that was the work we showcased yesterday, and all of this needs to connect through AI and VR, and that's the role we play in the ecosystem. And then today's panel was focused around how we could take AI and blockchain together in connection with Internet of Things, and then look at use cases in genetics where genetic data is being shared, look at use cases in social ventures in blockchain where 90% of the revenue goes back to you in terms of a patient sharing your data. Up until now, as a patient, I've had no say in the ecosystem of what happens to me or my data. And then lastly is how do you connect all those dots together to tokenize where that data ends up, and to track where that data ends up. So it's been 2 different spheres, one sort of oriented around picking a use case in health and sort of brain, and then second one around how do we connect the dots across health.
Very nice, very nice. How is Life Singularity and your approach different and more impactful than other related solutions provided by competitors in the space?
Yeah, so one of the ways we differentiate ourselves from people who, or from entities, and AI is a very big problem set and it can be applied in many different dimensions. So we respect all of our competitors who have had sort of the guts to take on the challenge of applying AI in health. What we are trying to do, and what our clients have told us, is that we have the ability to take typically competitors would start with a disease in mind, diabetes or lung cancer, and go deep within that space. We tend to take all of your life data, as it will, and we put it through our AI technology. So it's sensing all of those trajectories simultaneously. So if you were a patient with 18 diseases and 30 different drugs in your system, and if you go to one of the other AI companies, they are focused on that one condition of diabetes. We are looking at all 18 plus millions of other factors brought together. So that's one way we differentiate ourselves. The second way is that, so if you knew 5 days ahead or 5 months ahead that John was going to be a cancer patient, or John was going to have an episode of hypertension or a congestive heart failure, what can you do about it? So if you had that insight, what do you do about it? And that's where we are providing virtual care through our virtual assistant to not only lower the cost of health, but to begin engaging the patient in a very different journey. So if John hasn't called home for 3 days, and because we can sense that, they've been in their room for 3 days locked, perhaps they're schizophrenic, perhaps they're depressed. So our agent would reach out and say, hey John, do you want me to book you a movie? Or hey John, here's something for you to watch today. Or can I call your mother for you? And so becoming a part of patients' ongoing journey. So life is, if you measure life, 20% is genetic, 80% is lifestyles and behaviors. We are focused on integrating that 80, which nobody else is focused on. So those would be our big ways of approaching how we differentiate ourselves.
Right. How are your offerings reflecting today's patient, customer, or market trends, needs, or demands?
Yeah. So AI, for example, a lot of vendors are picking each of these technologies individually, even our competitors. We began with the patient in mind, and patient is not about one thing. The problem is multifactorial, and you need all of my contexts together. So it's a holistic view of health. So we began with AI with that mindset. So when I leave the hospital and I'm at home, maybe I'm wandering around the hallways because I have dementia. You wouldn't know that if you were, not my physician, or you didn't have me in a hospital setting. Maybe I get up at 2 a.m. in the morning because I always get up and I always fall down. So 2 a.m. our virtual agent can turn on the light by the bed because we know your context, right? And it's that kind of data. So if I complete 10,000 steps because I'm a diabetic, that data now flows back to my physician. The blockchain underneath would clear out that smart contract and say, John has been adhering to good behaviors, right? So, and the third layer around sort of taking the AR, VR aspect of this, we wanted to make sure that life is a little bit about fun. And a lot of, it's known fact now that, for example, depressives talk a lot more when they engage with a virtual agent versus talking to a real person online. If we sense that you are a schizophrenic and your voice intonation and your eye contact isn't there, we'll begin to make some inferences over a period of time to begin a baseline about you. And I think those are the ways we need to approach health, keeping in mind that we need to lower the cost. So virtual agent technology allows us to lower cost. Blockchain allows us to connect your life journeys together, and AI enables us to predict what that future costly event might be so that we can prevent it. So so that's kind of how we are approaching and why we feel we are in the field of sort of, if I can predict, I can preempt, and if I can preempt, I can prevent.
Very good. And then lastly, what are the top 2 or 3 things bio attendees or executives should take away from attending this year's convention?
In general, or in general?
Interweave too.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of, one of my